Hello! In the following video, you will be introduced to the concept of learning outcomes and some examples that you can adapt to the context of EFL teaching in rural areas. Do you usually feel insecure about the alignment between learning outcomes and your class's activities and assessment? Do you know the exact difference between learning outcomes and learning objectives? Well, let me tell you a little secret. The key ingredient is in the lesson plan. Learning outcomes are statements that specify what learners will know or be able to do as a result of a learning activity. They are usually expressed as knowledge, skills, or attitudes. According to the University of Texas, learning outcomes have three distinguishing features. The specified action by the learners must be observable, must be measurable, and must be done by the learners. For a learning outcome to be consistent, it must meet all these three criteria so that the students can perform those specified actions at the end of the learning activity. Let's take a look at some tips that will help you develop your learning outcomes. Tip 1. Set up your criteria. Make sure that the learning outcomes you have designed answer the four following questions with a solid yes. Do they reflect broad conceptual, essential knowledge and generic skills or attitudes? Do they focus on results of the learning experiences that your students will undergo in class? Do they reflect the desired end of the learning process rather than the process itself? And do they clearly state the minimum level of performance that the students must achieve at the end of the program? Remember that outcomes must be designed from the perspective of what the student, not the teacher, will know and be able to do by the end of the course. That is precisely their main difference with learning objectives, which only state what the teachers are responsible for in the classroom for learning to take place. As you can see, learning outcomes are broad enough to set up tasks for both teachers and students to do in order to assure effective learning. Tip 2. Become familiarized with the benefits of learning outcomes. Again, this framework is heavily student-centered, and this significant and essential learning must be very focused through specific and measurable skills. Some of the benefits that the students can take advantage of are: students know more precisely what is expected from them. As the curriculum is made more transparent for students, they learn more effectively. Teachers can design their own material following a clear route. And teachers can select teaching and assessment strategies aligned with the outcomes desired. Tip 3. Learn how to write coherent learning outcomes. Now, let's see a practical example about how to write a solid learning outcome. Please follow these recommendations by Kennedy et al. Begin with an action verb, followed by the object of the verb, then followed by a phrase that gives the context. Use only one verb per learning outcome. Make sure that it represents an observable and measurable behavior or a skill. And make sure that your outcome can be assessed. And design your rubrics and establish your performance criteria accordingly. For example, for cognitive outcomes, such as demonstrating knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, etc., you may want to write something along the lines of: by the end of this project, students are expected to analyze the eating habits of rural students in their school by stating a minimum of 3 positive and 3 negative habits. For affective outcomes, such as attitudes, feelings, and values, you may want to write something along the lines of: by the end of this workshop, students are expected to value the existence of multi-ethnic groups in the rural classroom by creating a set of 6 rules to practice respectful behavior in the school. And For psychomotor outcomes, such as skills or behavior, try to use verbs such as apply, adapt, adjust, etc. For example, by the end of this unit, students are expected to apply modal verbs and tourism vocabulary to design a Facebook page that promotes our local attractions. In summary, some key concepts about designing learning outcomes are: 1. Always make sure they represent observable and measurable student behavior. 2. Don't confuse them with learning objectives. 3. Become familiarized with the benefits they bring to the teaching-learning cycle. And 4. Learn how to differentiate and integrate cognitive, affective, and psychomotor outcomes. So, good luck in creating your own effective method to design solid learning outcomes. Before we go, we have a challenge for you. Try to improve this aspect in at least one of your classes next week. Thanks for watching, and make sure you check out the next video in this series.